So what are the 6 fundamentals? They are anatomy, perspective, form, structure, lighting and shading, color, and composition. So let's get to the first one, form and structure. Forms are 3D shapes with width, length, and depth, like cubes, circles, rectangles, and pyramids. Every object is made out of form. Literally everything, from anatomy to objects to backgrounds, they can all be made up into 3D shapes. There are 2 types of forms, geometric and organic. Geometric forms are perfect shapes like cubes and spheres, while organic forms are more irregular, like curves of a tree or a rock. If you have a good understanding of form and structure, you'll be able to draw anything. So for example, basic shapes are used in early sketches or drafts before adding details and definitions to give the work more recognizable form. So if you know form, you can make your sketching a lot easier as well. You can study form by drawing shapes in different directions and perspectives, cutting shapes in half, and learning how to angle them using rubber bands. Then you can also try drawing objects as basic shapes. Do this by focusing on the shape and trying to get it down as quickly as possible, focusing on the structure without focusing on the detail. Next we have anatomy. It's important to understand anatomy if you're drawing characters. It's probably one of the art fundamentals you'll first notice you need to improve on, as it's one of the first things that you'll probably notice you're lacking in. So for example, here's one of my first pieces where the anatomy was pretty and here's one that is a lot better. You can tell which one's obviously more improved on. So that's why anatomy is important. You can study anatomy by breaking down references and redrawing them, learning proportions. Again, look at the reference. You can find the references on Pinterest by searching up reference poses or anatomy poses. And then you can also do gesture drawings and figure drawings. Next we have perspective. Perspective is about your point of view. It's the illusion of depth on a 2D surface. For example, objects get smaller as they get further away from you. That is perspective. So form and perspective go hand in hand. There are different types of perspective, like 1-point perspective or 2-point perspective, where the shapes converge and disappear, and then there's atmospheric perspective, where the objects in the background decrease in contrast, saturation, and detail.
asking me. Jeez, new life. You kind of sound like Jaden. Jaden Animations? Jaden? In disguise? I remember one of the first people.
With the non-stop growth of social media and art influencers nowadays, numbers of views on art hashtags rising by the second, millions of new professional art pieces popping up wherever you look, art can be a pretty daunting world to step into. And while it may be tempting to copy some YouTube manga tutorial from 2014 and call it a day, I'm going to give you little art fetuses some must-have tips and tricks that'll make your journey of improvement so much easier. What's the deal with color schemes? Why do you flip the canvas? Why doesn't my rendering look good? How do you draw hands? Well, don't you worry, little ones. Grab a sketchbook and a cup of tea because I'm here to answer all your questions. Hey there, I'm Parako and welcome to my silly little art channel. If you're interested in art tips, challenges, or just enjoy my art in general, feel free to stick around. And hey, maybe drop a like and subscribe if my channel seems like your type of thing. Okay, thanks! So you're ready to dive into the deep end of the Olympic swimming pool that is being an artist. You've got your sketchbook, canvas, tablet, math booklet, whatever it may be, and pencil in hand, you're ready to create a masterpiece. Only problem is, you've got no idea how to draw a person. Well, I really wish younger outfitters me knew this, but the fastest and most effective way to improve your anatomy is by using references. Whoa, I know what you're thinking. But Parako, everyone says that references is cheating! Well, that's just simply not true. Cheating is tracing or copying someone's work, or AI-generated art, posting it or claiming it as your own, and not learning from it. However, real-life references are an essential tool when it comes to improving. This isn't just for beginner artists. Renowned professionals such as Jackie Drucker and Sam Does Art swear by the use of references on a daily basis. You can find useful references on Google, or Pinterest, which is just Google's more useful cousin, or even just by observing from real life, like cafe or train sketching. Alternatively, you can use posing apps like Easy Pose, available for free on the App Store. These ones make it more useful to draw dynamic poses from the exact perspective you want and are really helpful when illustrating a comic or animation. However, be careful when it comes to posing apps because they can often be stiff and unrealistic, which is why I personally prefer to use real-life images of people making specific poses naturally. Once you've got your reference, you can begin to recognize the very simple shapes, lines, and angles in the image. Then once you're ready, you can go and translate those onto a blank page, drawing it yourself in order to understand how simple shapes can make up a coherent piece. See? They may look like building blocks right now, but once we add a few guidelines, and then gradually more detail, we've already got a basic idea of a pose. Now remember, the anatomy of your art does not have to be a one-to-one copy of your reference. As for me, I like to push and exaggerate the lines and angles as much as I can, just to make it all the more interesting. And honestly, it just really depends on your art style. Have you ever been working on a sketch as normal before realizing it just doesn't look right? And then you try to fix it, but it still looks like a mess, and then you get more and more frustrated until you inevitably throw your sketchbook across the room out of anger and it knocks over a cup of water, ruining all your art? Not that that's ever happened to me or anything. Anyway, this can all be avoided by simply reversing the image. Just go into the menu and click this button. It's over here for you Ibispaint users. And for all you traditional artists, you can either take a photo and flip it from there, or just hold it up to a mirror. I've had surprisingly a lot of comments asking why you do this, which is sort of crazy to me because I honestly thought it was common knowledge for artists. The reason why you're supposed to flip the canvas is because when you're drawing with your dominant hand, your brain gets used to what it's seeing and becomes blind to its mistakes. This is why when reversing it, it's like putting a pair of glasses on your brain. You can see your mistakes more clearly and find out what you did wrong. And I know a lot of people think if no one's going to flip the image when they see it anyway, then what's the point of even doing it? Well, as everyone knows, making mistakes is crucial in order to learn. And if you really want to improve and become the best artist you can be, then recognizing your mistakes is the first step in doing so. Once your canvas is flipped, you can go ahead and use the liquify tool, sorry traditional folks, and just push and pull it a little until it looks better. And don't just do this once, make sure you're flipping it regularly. Another thing you can do to improve your composition is add a completely white layer above your rendered art and set the blending mode to saturation. This will allow you to see the values of your art and balance them out. Honestly, I wish I knew this earlier. Painting with values and in grayscale is an amazing skill to have. When you're choosing a colour scheme, please don't just do what Art Fetus Me did and grab the most random, bright, clashing colours that do not work at all together. Let me explain. One of the best ways to improve your colour schemes is by using limited colour palettes. Your colour palette needs to be somewhat balanced and harmonious, and we can do that by checking out the good old colour wheel. You've probably learned this in art classes before, but colours that are opposite each other on the colour wheel are known as complementary, named so because they complement each other. The most common are the main primary and secondary colours. Now, obviously this is overpowering and incongruous, but that's where our values and saturation come in. Personally, what I like to do is use one colour for the highlights and the other for the shadows, with in-between hues linking them together to make a pretty colourful palette. Alternatively, you can limit your colour palette by using an analogous colour scheme. Using only 2 to 4 hues can make your image seem a lot more professional and easy to look at. One of my personal favourites is orange, yellow, and green. However, if you do find yourself wanting to use more colours, another method is selecting one hue and setting it to overlay over a current colour scheme. It almost creates an analogous colour scheme for you. But if you're really stuck on creating a limited colour palette, you can also use gradient maps. Procreate has a few in the menu that you can try out. I unfortunately don't know if there's a substitute on Ibis Paint, and it essentially makes sure your colours fit into a select few. They always end up looking really cool, and I'm surprised I only discovered them a little while ago. But I think that no matter what your art level is, if your colours look good, you're off to an amazing start. I always find myself getting comments asking how I render and to do a tutorial. And honestly, all this time, I've kind of tried to ignore them because I actually have no idea how to explain it. Like seriously, I have no idea what I'm doing. But I'm gonna try my best because I really want to help you guys. Though my biggest inspirations when it does come to rendering are Sol Rojo, Sam Does Art, and Lorna Kelleher. So I recommend checking out their content first because they're honestly
안녕하세요, 조맹입니다. 안녕하세요, 조맹입니다. 이 스케치북에 그린 그림들은 최근에 그렸던 그림들입니다. 이번 시간에는 몸을 그려볼 거고요. 전반부에는 비율에 따른 전신을 그려볼 거고, 후반부에는 다양한 포즈의 인체를 그릴 때 도움될 만한 연습 방법도 같이 해볼 거예요. 이 영상을 보면서 같이 그려보다 보면 제가 어떤 순서로 그림을 그리는지 알게 되고, 평소에 어떤 연습으로 인체를 그리는지 알게 되실 거예요. 우리는 특별한 것을 하는 건 아니에요. 그냥 인체를 자주 그려보고 연습하는 거예요. 그러면 같이 그려보시길 바래요. 얼굴이 동그랗지 않고 조금 길다랗다는 건 제가 많이 얘기를 했습니다. 이 얼굴보다 조금 더 크게, 여기보다 조금 더 크게 해서 몸통을 그려줄게요. 손이 이렇게 흔들리네요. 그 다음에 가운데 조그마한 원 살짝 띄워서 이 폭이 1.5배에서 2배 정도 되는 타원을 그립니다. 그러면 너무 길어졌는데 옆에다가 다시 그려볼게요. 얼굴, 몸통, 자, 이 정도로 그려놓고 그 다음에 이 상체를 이게 한 번에 그려보는 것도 되게 재밌어요. 그 다음에 어깨에서 배꼽이 한 여기 있는데 배꼽 정도까지 팔꿈치가 내려옵니다. 이게 한 번에 그려보는 것. 그 다음에 가운데 조그마한 1.5배에서 2배 정도 되는 타원을 그립니다. 그러면 너무 길어졌는데 옆에다가 다시 그려볼게요. 얼굴, 몸통, 이 정도로 그려놓고 어깨, 그 다음에 이 상체를 이게 한 번에 그려보는 것도 되게 재밌어요. 그 다음에 이 상체를 이게 한 번에 그려보는 것도 되게 재밌어요. 그 다음에 어깨에서 배꼽이 한 여기 있는데 배꼽 정도까지 팔꿈치가 내려옵니다. 여기까지 그렇게 어렵지 않으셨죠? 여기는 지워볼게요. 여기가 가랑이 부분인데 보통 여기가 인체의 가운데쯤 됩니다. 그러면 이렇게 해서 가운데가 무릎. 자, 이때 다리 다리를 그릴 때 이 다리를 이렇게 무릎. 자, 이때 다리를 그릴 때 이 다리를 이렇게 그리면 안 되고 이렇게 띄워서 그려주세요. 그리고 골반이 조금 과장해서 이렇게 좀 크게 그려줍니다. 자, 이때 이 다리의 이 안쪽 라인 는 거의 일자로 내려오고 이 바깥쪽 라인은 튀어나왔다가 무릎에서 일자, 그리고 다시 한번 튀어나왔다가 이렇게 얘도 튀어나와서 들어갔다가 일자로 내려오고 이렇게 이런 식으로 그리면 됩니다. 그리고 자, 이때 이 다리의 이 안쪽 라인은 거의 일자로 내려오고 이 바깥쪽 라인은 튀어나왔다가 무릎에서 일자, 그리고 다시 한번 튀어나왔다가 이렇게 얘도 튀어나와서 들어갔다가 이 바깥쪽 라인은 튀어나왔다가 무릎에서 일자, 그리고 다시 한번 튀어나왔다가 이렇게. 얘도 튀어나와서 들어갔다가 일자로 내려오고 이렇게 이런 식으로 그리면 됩니다. 그리고 팔을 마저 그려볼게요. 이렇게 어깨가 있으면 팔꿈치가 이 배꼽 근처라 그랬잖아요. 그러면 팔목은 이 가랑이 근처입니다. 그리고 이 팔이 그냥 일자로 내려오는 게 아니라 내려왔다가 옆으로 휘는 느낌으로. 이렇게 내려왔다가 이 골반 뒤에 팔이 있다고 생각할게요. 다가 옆으로 휘는 느낌으로. 이렇게 이 골반 뒤에 팔이 있다고 생각할게요. 이 골반 뒤에 팔이 있다고 생각할게요. 팔목이 있고. 자, 여기다가는 조금 비율을 다르게 해볼게요. 키를 한 이 정도에 맞춰가지고 얼굴 굵기는 비슷하게 해볼게요. 그리고 다리가 여기에 와야 되니까 좀 더 가운데가
It's you again. Welcome back. Learning to draw is a lot of fun, but it can be pretty daunting at first. Like, where do you even start? How do you make sure you're not wasting your time practicing useless stuff? Well, don't worry anymore. Because over the next 30 days, I'll show you step by step how to draw. 3 years ago, I posted this video and it really took off since. So many artists used it to build a good foundation, setting them up for success, and the feedback has been great overall. But there was a lot I thought I could have done better. So this is where this video comes in. You see, I've perfected the 30 exercises that I'll demo for you today. 30 carefully crafted exercises to take you from 0 to good enough to impress most people. I've redesigned most of the exercises from scratch to be more fun and paced in a more natural transition from easy to hard, ultimately delivering more results in the same 30 days. So if you're up for the challenge, let's get started with day number 1.
Hold up. Wait a minute.
Oh, actually, before you attempt the first exercise, it's important we start with a little test so you have like a starting point to compare back to once you've completed the 30-day challenge. Like a clear way to see your progress. I guarantee this will be 100% worth it, so before you do anything, your first task will be to draw a skull. This one, in under 10 minutes. And only once you've done that, or rather attempted to do that, and possibly failed, then you'll be ready to move on to day 1. So for the first day of the challenge, we'll start real slow and easy. The goal will be to start by drawing a square freehand, as symmetrical as you can make it, split it in quarters, and use those intersections as guides to draw a circle perfectly snug inside. And real quick before we move on to day 2, the idea with these exercises is to do one every single day. Like powering through multiple ones in one day is not really gonna help you much. Your brain needs the time to let things marinate properly. If you're quick, I would rather do the same exercise multiple times a day, if you want the extra practice. But yeah, the idea is that you should be able to do most of these exercises in like 10 to 15 minutes a day, or less if you have more experience. But don't hesitate to take longer if needed, especially if you haven't really drawn much before. Anyway, for day 2, you'll just need to draw 3 random shapes like these, and then give them varying thickness by drawing the same shapes but slightly offset, and joining any corners with lines all parallel to each other. On day 3, this time you'll draw 3 cylinders. It's you again. Welcome back. If I started to draw next year, here's everything I would do to make sure I get the best possible start to my art journey. Think of learning art like a video game. These are the early game quests that you want to make sure you clear to successfully complete the beginner tutorial. So by the end of this video, you'll have strong basics to build on and the right direction to keep moving forward with your art. I'm Mark. I've been doing art professionally for over 20 years and I've been teaching for over 13. And I put all of that experience into this blueprint, basically something I would have killed for when I was just starting. Except you get to skip spinning your wheels for years like I did. I think that's worth the class fee of either 1 like or 1 sub. Experts agree it's good value. All right, let's jump right in. So the very first quest in this art game, answer this question. Why are you learning art? But like, seriously, before you pick up a pencil, you need to know where you're going with it. You need a specific goal. And there's research on this too. It's science. It's been shown that people with clear goals, like meaningful goals, are significantly more likely to push through challenges and actually get good at their craft. Because usually what happens when you don't have a goal, you'll bounce around, like drawing anime one day, then the following week maybe moving on to like realistic portraits, maybe then some landscape after that. You'll just be learning random stuff with no clear direction. And that's honestly the fastest way to just burn out and quit. Your why doesn't need to be huge either. Maybe you want to create your own comic. Maybe you just want to draw cool stuff and post it online for clout. Whatever it is, just make sure that it fits what researchers call a SMART goal, aka a goal that's specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. It's a clever way to make sure that your goal isn't too big and therefore too difficult to achieve. So if the goal is to eventually draw a comic, for example, it's already something specific. It's measurable, like you need 15 pages of comics. It's attainable if you're realistic about the quality. It's relevant to artists because you'll need art skills like character design, storytelling, and anatomy, and giving yourself a deadline of something like 1 to 2 months, or maybe to submit it to a contest that's coming up, perhaps. That will make it time-bound, so you'll have to force yourself to fit that into your schedule to meet your deadline. So as long as it's an SMART goal, you should be all set to move on to the next quest. So quest number 2 is all about pen control. This is your dexterity training, something that most artists will completely skip over and really struggle with for a long time during their art journey. So if you've ever tried to draw a smooth circle and it came out looking like a potato, that's weak pen control, basically. It's the difference between your hand doing what your brain wants versus whatever that is. Getting good with a pencil is as much a mental and a physical skill. Like, you can know how to draw well, but have poor dexterity, so the execution kind of sucks. Or it can be a complete opposite as well. So the fix would be to start drawing basic shapes, lots of them. Circles, straight lines, curves, boxes. Set a timer for like 10 minutes a day maybe, and just fill pages with these. I used to do this all the time when I was younger, filling pages with these kinds of exercises until I got significantly better and faster at it. In a sense, this isn't as much a quest that you complete and then you're done. It's maybe more like a daily quest, something you do a little bit of for a long time. But actually, there's another method, and that would be using the lasso tool in your workflow, because that would be a fantastic way to power level your dexterity. It's hard and frustratingly slow at first, but if you'd rather not fill your sketchbook pages with lines and shapes, well, that would be the best alternative way to practice while maybe doing something a little bit more productive at the same time, or maybe more rewarding. Now, quest 3 is all about practicing form, also known as the fundamental of construction. And this is where things get really interesting, because this will unlock 3D thinking in your brain when you're drawing on a 2D surface. Everything you draw, and I mean everything, is made of simple 3D shapes. Buildings on the street, mostly simple boxes. The human body, boxes and cylinders. Robots like Gundams, still boxes, spheres.
It's been what, 5 years since I started taking drawing seriously, and I feel dissatisfied. I mean, I have a couple of drawings that I like and can say that I'm proud of, but for how long I've been doing this, it's embarrassing how little I can actually do. Like, I really only ever draw faces from the same angle with the same facial features. I call him Bobby because he doesn't have a bob. And when I do try drawing something different, it just frustrates me because it reveals just how limited my abilities actually are. Hands are still as much of a pain to me now as they were back then. And when I draw objects, they look more like vague suggestions instead of proper representations of them. You'd think that after half a decade I'd have figured those out by now. That's why, if you don't mind me ranting, can I first just talk about how art is probably the least fulfilling skill you can learn? This is my thinking, right? If you ask me to plot a bunch of different skills on a commitment versus satisfaction graph, it'll probably look a little something like this. On one end, there's the low commitment but low satisfaction type of skills, things like driving. Most people can learn how to drive in only a couple of days. It really isn't that big of a deal. But once you've learned it, you've pretty much got a lifelong skill, which is very convenient. Meanwhile, on the other end of the graph, there are the high commitment but high satisfaction type of skills. Things like learning an instrument. Right away, there's a high bar of entry. You gotta buy an instrument that costs money. You gotta be able to handle only having bread sandwiches for the next few weeks. Not to mention the hundreds of hours you gotta put in just to get good. But when you do get good, you can just play whenever you feel like it. And it's fun.
This is Mr. Tambourine Man. Hey, Mr. Tambourine Man, play a song to me. Not sleepy and there is no place I'm going to.
Plus, you can look cool in front of other people, and if you think about it, is why anybody ever bothers to learn anything, really. Drawing, however, is over here. High commitment, but low satisfaction. It doesn't matter how long you've been doing it, drawing will always be a long and tedious process to get the results you want. It's not really fun. You could spend hours on a single illustration and still end up with something less than satisfactory. Oh, what did your 4 hours get you? One of these? That's cool, I guess. Not as cool as a video or a song that you can enjoy for a few minutes at least. I think that with a video or a song, because there's so much more that goes into it, that just being able to make a decent one with an identifiable structure and tone is already impressive enough. It is for me, and I think a lot of people can already appreciate that. The same cannot be said about drawing. Some people will take time out of their day to belittle your drawing skills, especially if you draw anime, dude. Ugh. Some middle-aged lady will come up to you and say, "Oh, you draw, huh? My 8-year-old nephew can do that too." Like, oh my god, shut up. And of course, there's the looming threat of generative AI. Look, I don't buy the argument of, oh, it doesn't even look that good. because it's just gonna keep getting better. And as much of a betrayal it is to human creativity as a whole, at some point, people aren't gonna be able to tell the difference. And once that happens, are gonna care less and less about the ethics of it all. A big flaw we have as humans is that when something is convenient for us, we are more than willing to look the other way. But I realized that it isn't really fair to people whose main shticks are any of the ones I mentioned before. I'm sure they have days where they feel like they've stagnated or haven't been improving at all, and they're probably being screwed over by AI too. Everyone is. I realized that that way of thinking isn't really helpful and will only send me deeper into my downward spiral of depression. So instead, I wanted to reflect on where I went wrong so that hopefully I could find a way to get satisfaction out of drawing again. And I wanted to share that here so that if any beginner artists were to see, they'd know what not to do and not end up as jaded as I am. Alright, let's start from the beginning. I say I started drawing seriously 5 years ago because that's when I got my first drawing tablet, which means I was willing enough to commit to learning this skill that I would beg my parents to put money into it, because they had all the money. I was 13. But even long before that, I would doodle a lot. I've never been the type to write notes in school, so my notebooks were always just filled with random doodles I did in class. While my doodles did consist of the occasional fan art, most of them were actually comic strips with original characters I'd written myself. You see, for as long as I can remember, I have just wanted to write stories and be able to tell them. And comics were a way of doing that that really appealed to me. I made them all the time in elementary school and everyone knew about it. I became the artist in my class, and some people would actually look forward to reading my comics. I guess that's part of why I love Look Back so much. The first part of that story I practically lived through, except instead of an underclassman humbling me, it was all the child prodigies on the internet who were just 10 times better than me at everything. When I found out that most anime was based on Japanese comics, I was ecstatic. I knew that that was where I would get a lot of inspiration from. Back then, my dream was to be a manga artist in Japan, which is funny now that I know how awful the working conditions are, but back then, I was convinced that that was gonna be my future. And even though I didn't know how yet, I just kept on drawing. But then 2020 happened. We all know 2020. We all know it sucked for everyone. I was 13 years old. Being 13 is weird, right? Because you start losing all the benefits of being a kid, but you don't get any of the benefits of being an adult either. I think it sucks how much we overrate money. Having money shouldn't be anyone's ultimate goal in life, right? That just sounds sad. But when you're in a position where everything you want to do, you can't because you don't have enough money, it screws with your head, man. Suddenly, it's all you can think about. That was me when I was 13. I thought I needed to make money, and I needed to make it now. I didn't even consider the fact that I wasn't good enough at anything yet to even deserve to make money. I was just gonna do it somehow. So I came up with a plan. I asked for the drawing tablet, and what I was gonna do was I was gonna make a comic and publish it on Webtoon. If you don't know what Webtoon is basically YouTube for webcomics, where essentially anyone can just put up their own series, and if enough people read it, then that series could then be monetized. Webtoon was blowing up at the time. A few had just been picked up for their own anime adaptations, so I thought, sweet, this was my one-way ticket to the anime industry, baby. It was the perfect plan. Except, who knew that drawing on a tablet is way harder than drawing on paper? Where's the friction, man? Why is it so smooth? Also, webtoons are usually fully colored with detailed backgrounds. I didn't know how to do that. So yeah, there were a couple of setbacks to my plan, and I had a choice. I could get to work and start developing the skills that I lack, or I could do something else to make money. I chose the latter. I think that was my first mistake when learning how to draw. I let myself be motivated by the wrong thing. Art isn't exactly known to be the most lucrative hobby. There are tons of great artists out there who struggle to even make a cent out of their work. Yet somehow I was gonna do it with my portfolio of Jack. That was a video I made to promote my Fiverr gig at the time. I had the audacity to charge $90 for that. Doc, he ain't right in the head. People who make a living through art are people who just love making it so much that they don't even consider it a job. They'd be doing it regardless if it made them any money or not. If you want to make money, just start a lemonade stand. That's way easier. I've just sort of accepted that I'm on thin ice for a while until I graduate university. But yeah, going back to this story, I just learned about art commissions. I learned that some people, if they like your art style, they will pay you to draw things for them. And to me, that sounded way easier than drawing comics. But where would these people find you? That was when I fell into the trap of social media. Social media isn't all bad. In fact, the fastest I've ever improved as an artist was the period when I first discovered social media. There are so many talented artists on Twitter and on Instagram that just inspired me to keep trying out new things and get better. I used to avoid coloring my art entirely because it always ended up looking weird, but then I discovered Dino Alus on Twitter, who has this very painterly art style that I love and wanted to copy. And now coloring is my favorite part of drawing. I like carving out the forms in my subject. I think it's very satisfying. Where I went wrong with social media was when I started prioritizing engagement over anything else. When I started posting, I didn't get any traction at all. My posts would get 10 likes at most, which didn't bother me. I would still keep drawing every day, and what was cool about that was my drawings would get better every time I posted. People would actually comment on this saying, wow, you're improving really fast, and I thought, cool, people are actually liking something I made, which made me even feel more motivated. When I got my first 100 likes, it felt awesome. I felt like I'd finally hit my stride and there was nowhere to go but up. That is until my next post just bombs, didn't even get half as many likes. I thought, what's wrong? I put in the same amount of work. It's not like I half-assed this one. Why isn't anybody liking it? I posted a couple more drawings and they didn't do so well either. I started drawing less and less. I didn't draw unless I thought that it would get a bunch of likes. What once was a good source of motivation was now holding me back. My drawings got so boring. They'd all just be portraits of trending characters at the time. I'd spend hours on these portraits, but I didn't have any fun making them until I stopped. I stopped trying to improve, and now I get angry whenever I do have an idea for a drawing but can't execute it because I don't have the skills for that. I wasted my time focusing on the wrong things and not committing to anything. I developed a lot of bad habits because I was always taking shortcuts. I ruined drawing for myself. I still want to get better at drawing. I think it's a pretty cool skill to have, but I've been changing my approach a bit. No more posting on Twitter. I'm just gonna make stuff for the sake of it. Like, I wanted to incorporate my love of storytelling, so I started drawing comics again. I even made a couple of animations to force myself to draw things from different angles and perspectives. It's been slow, and sometimes it feels like I haven't been making any progress, but overall I think it's better like this. I enjoy looking back at the things I make now way more than the things I made back when I was chasing clout. Anyways, that's about it. If you're an artist, don't do what I did. Drawing should always be something you do because you enjoy doing it. Otherwise, you ain't getting nothing out of it. Alright, peace.
I used to think that I just couldn't paint because I tried for years and nothing really got better. In fact, 2 months ago, I tried to paint this lady and I made this. And you might think, that's not that bad. That took me 12 hours. So I used to think that until I took not that ago, I tried to paint this lady and I made this. And you might think, that's not that bad. That took me 12 hours. So I used to think that until I took a class with Authoro and he showed me one exercise that changed everything. 8 weeks later, this painting became this. So in this video, I'm going to share what that exercise is, why it's so important, and how you can use it to create fully fledged paintings. But something I wish I knew before even trying to paint was what actually makes a good painting. When you look at artists like Ramon and Patrick O'Keefe, you might think that it's the colors and the subject matter that make a painting cool. While that's what captures most people's eye, it's actually the two things going on beneath the colors that makes the biggest difference. These two things dictate about 90% of the success of your painting, and that's values and shapes. That's all painting is. It's a series of good value choices and good shape choices, and this was the biggest thing that Authoro taught me. And if you look at his work, he clearly knows what he's talking about. So watch this video and then go follow him and study his work. But knowing this, the best way to improve would be to figure out some exercise that isolates those two skills. And this is where I'd love to introduce the black and white value study. This exercise single-handedly made the biggest difference with my art. It is to painting what the cube grid is to perspective. It is the simplest expression of painting. And before you can successfully paint these exciting vistas, you have to master the basics. So how do you do this exercise? Well, you find any reference and your job is to translate that reference into just black and white values. And you're gonna say, well, that seems really tough because nothing really looks like just the black and white read. And this is why it's such a powerful exercise. This exercise forces your brain to create a decision-making hierarchy when it looks at an image. When you only have two values to work with, but the image is a spectrum of color, your brain has to think, what are we trying to show? What is the clearest way to show that with just one value? And over time, as you repeat this exercise, you will learn what Patrick O'Keefe calls graphic reduction. This is the ability to look at an image and then reduce it graphically into a sequence of shapes that emphasize its form. This is the secret behind Ramon, Patrick O'Keefe, Authoro, and all these amazing painters that we look at and go, wow, they can paint. If your reference can be understood only in black and white, then you have successfully laid the foundations for a painting already. Now we're gonna get into how to take it from here to here later in the video, but right now let's focus on how to do this well. The most important thing to do is to start with the biggest basic shapes, and what Authoro made me do was use a flat square brush. Don't use an opacity brush. You are intentionally creating limits on your own tool set so that you're forcing your brain to make as many decisions as possible. The more decisions you've had to correct, the better you have learned. So this exercise forces you to make tons of decisions because you have no variables to work with. You only have one color and you have one shape of your brush. So I started out with the most basic reference I could find, which were images of primitive forms under harsh lighting. The harsher your lighting, the less interpretation you have to make as the viewer. If you take an image with very diffused light, there aren't clear borders of light and shadow, which makes it really hard. So start off with images like this. As you're doing this exercise, the most important thing you want to capture is the shape. You need your painting to look like the shapes seen in the reference. So what I did was copy and paste the actual reference and then work on that layer so that I know that the ratio of my painting is the same. And at this level, I was doing what Authoro calls shape matching. Now, shape matching is what it sounds like. Your exercise is to match the shape you see in your reference and create it. Now, if you can do this successfully, you'll find that your forms read much better. And if you can't do this successfully, your painting isn't going to work at any level. Now, you can see this in effect with both of these paintings. They're both of the same reference, but one of them had a stronger black and white read than the other. And as you can see, when I progress the painting, look at which one remained stronger. Now, there's issues with both of them. They aren't perfect matches, but the aim of this exercise is one, to repeat hundreds of times throughout my 5 weeks with Authoro. I did probably 50 plus of these studies. Now you can do these studies on paper or you can do them digitally, but I did these wrong for so long. So make sure you're not making these mistakes. Firstly, as I mentioned in this video, trust your eyes because your brain lies. An example of how my brain used to lie to me was look at the image and then look at my painting. Notice how the values aren't the same because what I'm trying to do is separate the person from the background, so I would make them a darker or lighter value. I wasn't following the value scale I saw here. I was purely trying to create layers in my head, and that is not the way to approach this exercise. Now, the beauty of this is it's not only an exercise, it is the foundation of a method to take a painting from beginning to end. Authoro taught me that I can take my 2-value study and then add a 3rd value to it, and then add a 4th value to it, and then smooth out the 4 values to create a fully fledged painting. Now, I repeated this a number of times, and that is when I truly learned how to take an image from this to this. It's as simple as adding 1 value at a time. The point of the 2-value study is to train your eyes to see shapes and your brain to interpret value groups. Once you've done that, you move on to a 3-value study. Now, the 3-value study will feel like a breath of fresh air because you're all of a sudden working with so much more than you previously had. It will feel like Rock Lee dropping weights in that Gara fight. These magpies are having a full-on turf war. The same thought process goes with the 3 values. You just have another value to work with. So make sure to design your shapes and make sure to be very decisive on where the 3 value groups are. Now, sometimes your references aren't very clear and it can be really hard, for example, for a softly lit reference to find the value groups. And what I like to do is use the posterize feature on Photoshop. And you can adjust the levels to emphasize the shadows or highlights more. Now, if you don't have Photoshop or Procreate, it's okay. Proco has a website where you can adjust these images for yourself, and I've linked it down below. So throughout my 5 weeks, I did this 2-value, 3-value, and 4-value pass with Authoro, and it really honed my ability to make these visual decisions that made the form pop. And I want to show you this process in action with this painting. And as it plays, I want to talk about some general ideas that have really helped me with my painting. The first is that you have to get the shape down before you can get the form down. You'll see as I start this painting, I'm spending the majority of my time in the black and white phase. It does not matter if you can carve out forms if it's on the wrong foundations, and the black and white value pass is your foundation. At this stage, please make sure to have the proportions and the silhouette down pat. The second is that value matters so much more than color. You're going to see later that my coloring skills increased purely as a result of my value skills. You might already know this if you've watched these videos of artists painting in color, but their monitor is grayscale. Even when they show the color, it's random colors, but the painting still reads because it's all about the values. Now, the final piece of advice that Authoro really hammered into me was that you have to start simple before you can go complex. So he recommends always starting with the largest brush possible. You'll find that you work way faster when you think this way as well. Sometimes I slow down in this painting because I start finagling the tiny details, and what I have to do is squint and zoom out. If you're having a hard time finding value groups, squint. You will find them so much easier. So throughout this painting, I spent about 50% of my time on the black and white value study, 30% of my time on the 3 and 4 value study, and then the last 20% is just carving out the little forms here and there. You can see that it's so much more important the early stages of the painting rather than the end.